Now, I'm trying to think here for a second who number one's going to be. I really don't know. I'm assuming that it's got to be Mick Jagger. Because if it's not, Mick Jagger's not on the list. And it is Mick Jagger. I don't have a problem there. That I can live with that. But I got a lot of other problems. So off the top of my head, just very, very quick scratch notes, super off the top of my head of people not on this list. Hold on, because I'm scribbling furiously. All I got to do is look around my studio and see a million photos and ads and stuff of a million artists. Now, they, as is usual, and by the way, again, listen to Friday's show, because I go off about the whole hair band, hair metal thing and how marginalizing it is to the artists of the 80s who are completely forgotten at festivals and programming on classic rock radio station and in lists like this, because they don't have a fighting chance of being taken seriously unless you're Axl Rose. And I can't wait for you guys to hear Friday, because I analyze that too. Because there's a lot about that whole narrative. Well, Guns N' Roses were more raw and didn't look and sound like the other bands. Nonsense. Just listen on Friday. I can't wait for you guys to hear Friday, the first hour Friday. Because I recorded it already, just being honest. So forget about forget about anybody that sold millions. Forget about anybody from the 80s. That, unless you were punk or indie, I guess you're completely ruled out here. I'm scribbling furiously. It's insane how many things are not here. Off the top of my head, Glenn Hughes, one of the greatest singers in history of music still. David Coverdale, not on the list. If they wanted to make a trendy current band pick, you can't have a list like this without Jay Buchanan of the Rival Sons, who is widely considered to be one of the greatest singers currently singing in music. People like Glenn Hughes, two other people that should be on this friggin' list, Miles Kennedy. There's another one if you want a more current guy, meaning last 20 years. Sammy Hagar, are you serious? Sammy and Miles and Glenn will tell you Jay is the guy right now. None of them are in the top 50. So I just took care of your more current guys with Jay and Miles. And three absolute legends known for their voices: Hagar, Coverdale, Hughes. None of them in the 50. Why'd you do this to me, Joel? You should have just buried this thing. You should have deleted it, bleach bitted it, whatever you do when you're trying to make something go away. Oh. Definitely need that device. Okay, so according to Billboard, Glenn Hughes, David Coverdale, Jay Buchanan, Miles Kennedy, Sammy Hagar, not in the top 50 greatest singers in the history of rock, but Jerry Garcia is, and some people we never heard of. You knew you were never going to get a Sebastian Bach on this list, even though he should be, because he's from the 80s, you know. He's from a hair band. Again, listen on Friday for more on that. But any logical, rational, normal thinking rock fan, again, whether you like the band or not, has to acknowledge that Sebastian Bach set a bar that has rarely been touched when it comes to hard rock vocals on those Skid Row records, and being the front man as well. So you want to throw that in. It's insane. Bruce Dickinson. And that was the one Joel told me about. Bruce fucking Dickinson. Now, credit that they put Halford at a decent spot. But the Bruce Dickinson isn't there at all. I mean, considered to be one of the greatest singers in the history of metal. Still, by the way, still remarkable what Bruce does. In his mid-60s, cancer survivor, tongue cancer no less, throat cancer. Still. They were never going to put Paul Stanley on this list. But if you have any clue, and you're talking about people like some of these people lower on the list, like a Lou Reed or Jerry Garcia or whatever, Paul Stanley, first of all, sings circles around them in his prime, but also has that attitude. And, you know, they were justifying the inclusion of these people like a Paul Westerberg or Iggy Pop or whatever because of the intangibles and what have you. Okay. So in somebody like Paul Stanley in his prime, you got both. The guy could sing anything, had crazy power and range, and also still had that New York attitude if you wanted it on something like Strutter. I mean, mind-boggling. Nah, don't put him in. Not in the top 50. Ian Gillan. Anyone with a brain in their head will tell you of the impact of Ian Gillan. Listen to Child in Time, 1970. Are you serious? Joe Elliott of Def Leppard. You want an 80s guy that isn't Axl Rose? Of a band that's maybe a little more credible? I mean, Joe Elliott, what he did... Hysteria is not my favorite Def Leppard album at all. But what happens, what's going on in there vocally is insane. Jeff Tate? Hello? Jeff Tate? You're putting people that capture auras or whatever. How is Alice Cooper not on the list? You know, maybe, because again, this list is clearly not about just technically great singers. Where's Alice Cooper? Guy's been doing this 55 years. He's still great at 75 years old. How is Alice Cooper not there? And I know and knew all along that there's no way in hell, because at the end of the day, most of these lists are just popularity contests, and you got to know about these people, and they've got to have bigger profiles to make these lists. Richie Kotzen's one of the best singers alive, in my opinion, one of the greatest voices and coolest voices. He's known for being this amazing guitar player, which he is. But vocally, with Richie, it's always for me, like, I don't know if I like his voice or his playing better. They're both beyond insane. I knew they don't have a clue who he is, so they would never be there. But there's no list I'm making with 50 singers that he's not there. And lastly, And this is, you guys, I'm giving you nothing but stream of consciousness because I did not pre-read this and I did not prepare this intentionally. So you're going to call me with a million others, which is fine. But maybe the most mind-blowing omission on this list is Ronnie James Dio. Dio's not on this list. Ozzy is, but Ronnie isn't. And I'm not shitting on Ozzy. Ozzy was brilliant on the early Sabbath records. But, I mean, come on. David Lee Roth is for Van Halen, but Sammy Hagar is not. The guy that allowed Eddie Van Halen to completely open his musical palette because he could sing anything he threw at him. No, don't put him. Don't put Dio. Halford takes a knee to Dio. But Dio's not on the list. Rob will tell you that. But Michael Stipe at 16, but no need for Dio, no need for Sammy Hagar, no need for Glenn Hughes, no need for David Coverdale, no need for Bruce Dickinson. And if you're from the 80s and had success on MTV, you got immediately banned. Hair metal. Holy shit. Holy shit. This is way, way worse than I thought it was going to be, Joel. Way worse. I am really glad I didn't read this in advance because I may not have done it. I may not have done it just to save my blood pressure. Paul McCartney at 39. Wait a minute, John Lennon's not here at all. Holy shit, that just hit me. John Lennon's not here at all. Again, I'm not the biggest Beatles guy. I admit that. What, are you kidding me? Let me read a couple. I'm going to get to your calls here because I just need some qualification. I need to figure this out if they are just completely on crack or if there's some reason. I got to read this now because now that I see how whacked out this is, maybe there's some justification for this because there is an open here that in all fairness, I didn't read. Let me look through this real quick. Lead singers, it's almost a quaint topic. Huge bands, increasingly. Okay. Here at Billboard, we're taking a moment to honor the front of stage greats, the rock and roll singers who elevated their bands to stratospheric heights and inspired entire generations of vocalists to follow in the paths they blazed. These are the most legendary avatars from rock's 7-decade history, the folks who, with their singing and songwriting and live charisma, and particularly with their undefinable, all-encompassing presence, have done the greatest job of spreading the music's gospel to all corners of the world, serving as a mouthpiece for the bands and spokespeople for their genre. Wait a minute. Something else just hit me. I opened the show talking about an Elvis doc. Elvis is on this list. The king. The king. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I opened this show an hour ago telling you about an Elvis Presley documentary I watched. And he's not one of the top 50 singers. Zach De La Rocha is. Few people you never heard of is. Polystyrene is. But the king is not. Made even more mind-blowing by the qualification that I just read you. Okay, now this part's important. This may clear some of this up. It continues. In assembling our list, we allowed that some bands could have multiple front people considered lead singers, though we only ended up including one per group. Okay, so that explains the exclusion of John Lennon. Only one, if the band had multiple lead singers, only one per group. So they opted for McCartney over Lennon to include in the top 50 and put McCartney at 39. But that explains Lennon not being here. Okay. Article continues, but we were picky about the band part. Groups that had to be mostly consistent. Groups had to be mostly consistent from one album to the next and play the majority of their own instruments, as well as the rock part. While many of the groups here span or defy genres, we had to be comfortable considering them largely a rock band for them to count here. Okay, so why is Parliament here? Why can't anybody just do a fucking rock list? Jesus. Oh, I'm fucking losing it. I'm sorry. This makes me nuts. Why can't we just have something for rock fans ever? Why does the Grammys have to have non-rock bands in the rock category? Why does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have to put every other genre in? Why does this list, why, for the love of God, can anybody ever do something rock related and know what the fuck rock is and be rock? Why? Why is rock the one genre that has to include every other thing? Oh, your funk, your R&B, your hip hop, your country, your jazz. Oh, yeah, you're rock. For the love of God, for once. Can we get a Hall of Fame? Can we get an award show? Can we get a stupid list that's actually all rock? Not that hard. I do a show every day that's about rock music. It's not that hard. Well, many of the groups here span or defy genres. No, I thought the headline says rock. The final part here, and most challengingly, we opted to disqualify lead singers whose most famous bands are named after them. Bruce Springsteen, Prince, Joan Jett, because it made the lines between solo artist and band too blurry, and because we prefer to use this list to focus on the bands that were more democratically assembled, but whose front people still led the way in singular fashion. That's idiotic. I mean, that's idiotic. So they excluded Bruce Springsteen, Prince, and Joan Jett because they were solo acts? What? Who cares? And then it finishes, with all this in mind, here are our picks for the 50 greatest lead singers in rock history. I mean, that's embarrassing. That is embarrassing. How do you do that with a straight face? How do you? I can't even process any of this. I mean, that open dug this thing even deeper. And the only thing that open cleared up was the fact that it explains why John Lennon's not there. Outside of that, Kiss had has two lead singers, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons. Neither of them making the list. You didn't have to pick between them two. Oh, my God. I am going to go splash some cold water on my face, towel off. I think they say you take a low-dose aspirin as a preventative. I pop one of them. Probably take my blood pressure pill a little earlier than normal. And we will regroup. And when we come back, after the break, we will take your calls on this. Anything you'd like to bring up is all good. And yeah, I don't have a problem with number one. The one thing I have no problem with, I can live with, is number one. They got that right, at least. Here is number one, Little Stones and Mick Jagger. Going into break, we will be right back if I don't stroke out during the 3 minutes of commercials. I'll come right back.